Hey guys, tonight we descend into the darkest corners of history. Literally, we're going deep underground, where the air is wet, the walls sweat, and the job description includes try not to get stabbed by inmates or bitten by rats. You are a dungeon keeper in a not so glamorous medieval backwater. Not quite a knight, not quite a peasant, more like a janitor, therapist, zookeeper, and scapegoat all rolled into one. And yes, your job smells exactly as glamorous as it sounds. You probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up to the sound of dripping water. That's your alarm clock. That and the faint squelch of something moving near your feet. Probably a rat, possibly something worse. There's no sunlight down here, no warm beams slipping through wooden shutters, no cheerful birdsong. Just you, your straw stuffed palate that's gone suspiciously soft in one corner, and the sour metallic tang of old iron and ammonia. You sit up, slowly, because your back isn't what it used to be. Then again, it never was great. Sleeping in the damp, between a leaking ceiling and a moldy floor, has left your spine about as flexible as a rusted gate hinge. The only difference is, the rusted gate gets oil once a year. You swing your legs over the side and into your personal puddle. Every dungeon has one. Yours seems to be growing a community of its own. Tiny insects skittering across the surface, a patch of moss that's doing better than you are, and one bold frog that refuses to leave. You've named him Gilbert. He's the most emotionally stable thing in this building. Your first breath of the day tastes like mildew and disappointment. You reach for your tunic, which never really dries, just cycles between damp and extra damp, with a hint of despair. Pulling it over your head is like sliding into a cold hug from a wet stranger. There's no privacy, no mirror, no sink. Grooming is optional, but so is hope. You fumble for your torch, the stubby one with half a wick and a questionable smell. The last batch of tallow was mixed with something they found near the butcher's stall, which may or may not have been part shoe. You light it anyway, coughing as the smoke curls up into your nose and tries to settle into your lungs like an unwanted roommate. The dungeon stretches before you in flickering shadows, stone walls that cry moisture, iron bars that groan under the weight of rust and regret, straw piles in cells that might once have been beds, but now mostly serve as storage for lice, secrets, and old bones. The air hangs thick with the aroma of history, by which we mean unwashed men, spoiled porridge, and things you're legally not allowed to talk about before bedtime. You walk the corridor, your boots sticking slightly with each step. The floor is uneven, packed dirt mixed with things you try not to think about. You hear grunts, snores, coughs, and the low, wet rattle of someone who's definitely not getting up today. You don't check. You learned long ago that if someone dies quietly, that's a win. You do a head count. 1, 2, 3. Wait. 4? There were 4 in this cell yesterday. Now there are 3. And a suspicious trail of wet footprints leading toward the corner drain. You sigh. Either he escaped, dissolved, or was eaten by something that lives in the wall. You'll write it up later in your official dungeon keeper log, which is just a piece of wood where you scratch tally marks with a nail. Your stomach growls. Breakfast, or at least something resembling it. You shuffle to the storeroom, which contains 2 barrels, one for bread, the other for not bread. The bread barrel holds lumps of baked flour that might have been fresh when the last king was alive. The not bread barrel is more ambiguous. You poke through it and pull out a grayish slab of what might be salted fish, though it has the texture of shoe leather and the smell of an old sock having a nervous breakdown. You chew slowly, cautiously. Your jaw cracks audibly. This is the kind of food that makes you nostalgic for raw onions. And yet, this is the best part of your day. Historians still argue whether dungeon keepers were part of the official town guard or just unlucky volunteers who lost a bet. Records are vague. Some scrolls suggest they were appointed by sheriffs, others imply they were just too good at not dying in bad places. Either way, your job isn't to judge, it's to keep things contained, which is ironic because nothing down here ever stays put. The chains rattle even when no one's moving. The torches blow out in rooms with no drafts. One time, a chicken got in, and you still don't know how. You're not saying the place is haunted, but you're also not saying that. There's a reason you never sleep facing the door. Your torch flickers. You hear footsteps upstairs. The guard shift is changing. They won't come down here. They never do. You're alone with your thoughts, your torch, and a population of prisoners who all agree on one thing: you're the enemy. Even if you bring them food, water, or the occasional rat to roast, still, it's your job. And in a world where plague, war, and tax collectors exist, at least yours comes with a roof. Even if that roof leaks, and sometimes moans. Welcome to your morning. Just 18 more hours to go. You're still chewing the last bite of bread rock when something thumps against the far wall. You freeze, mid-chew. There's a pause, followed by a groan, then the unmistakable slosh of someone losing what little breakfast they had. Classic Cell 3. You trudge over, torch in hand, lighting the faces of the inmates like a haunted painting exhibit. Sunken cheeks, hollow eyes, and a few too many teeth missing to be coincidental. The newest prisoner, a scrawny pickpocket named Berwin, is curled in a fetal position, groaning like the floor insulted his mother. He claims he's ill, but that might just be code for, please get me out of here before the others eat my boots. You make a mental note. Move him later, or don't. Depends on how annoying he gets. Now it's time for inventory. Not for supplies, you ran out of ink 3 months ago, but for people. You rattle the iron bars one by one, the sound reverberating like thunder in a tomb. Still breathing? You ask. Some nod. Others grunt. One fellow just giggles. He's your favorite. Calls himself the Duke of Rot. He once gave a 3-hour monologue to a pigeon. You count. Again. 7 heads in the east wing, 9 in the west, 1 in the oubliette. Still unsure if he's alive or just really good at holding his breath. Everyone's present, which is surprising. Most mornings, at least one prisoner has tried to bribe a rat into chewing through their shackles. You inspect the chains. Rusty, sure, but functional. Mostly. One lock is held together with what looks like string and hope. You tighten it anyway, even though you know anyone determined enough could snap it with a stiff breeze. But hey, your job isn't to build a fortress. It's to delay disaster until someone above you decides to care. You pass by a door labeled Torture in faded chalk. You didn't write it. It's been there longer than you have. The room behind it is empty now. Tools removed, surfaces scrubbed clean, officially decommissioned. But nobody told the prisoners that. The threat still works. You only have to glance at the door and mention the room, and suddenly Cell 2 starts behaving like model citizens. Historians still argue whether such rooms were really used regularly or just for show. You don't argue, you just let the silence do the work. You hear another thump, louder this time, coming from the back wall near the pantry, a term you use loosely because it mostly contains pickled vegetables and regrets. You draw closer, squinting. There's a new hole in the stone, fresh cracks, spiderweb across the masonry. You sigh. Another escape attempt, or rats, or both. You reach for the iron poker you keep nearby. Not for fighting, really. More like hurting. You poke the hole. Something squeaks and darts back into the shadows. Not a prisoner, unless they're particularly furry and into gnawing. Note to self. Tell the blacksmith you need reinforcements. Not that he'll listen. The last time you asked for more chains, he laughed so hard he swallowed a button. Back to the cells. Cell 5's door is ajar. Not wide open, just a hair. Enough to be unsettling. You inch forward, ears straining. Inside, a man is slumped in the corner, motionless. You nudge the door with your boot. It creaks. Nothing happens. You step in. He moves. Fast. Grabs your ankle. You jump back and swat his hand with the poker. Not hard, just enough to express boundaries. He laughs, raspy and hollow. Just checking, he wheezes, making sure you weren't dead yet. Charming. You lock the door properly this time, slipping a sliver of bone into the latch to keep it steady. Improvised? Yes. But effective? Sort of. You've developed a real talent for fixing things with broken bits of other things. A dungeon MacGyver. You once repaired a torch bracket using a spoon, 3 threads of hay, and a dried beetle wing. It held for a week. Moving on, you reach the far cell, the one nobody talks about. It holds just one man. No name, no record. Just arrived one day in chains, escorted by knights who refused to speak and reeked of incense. You haven't heard him speak. He just sits, stares, blinks very little. One time you thought he was asleep, until you noticed he was carving something into the wall. A symbol you've never seen before. Looks a bit like a spider doing yoga. You don't linger. Down the hall, someone starts singing. Loudly. Badly. It's a ballad about cheese. You've heard it before. 42 verses and not a single accurate rhyme. The other prisoners groan. One throws a tin bowl, which ricochets off the bars and hits you in the shin. You blink. Count to 10. Then add 5 more for professionalism. You check the wall calendar. Again, a generous term. It's just a series of scratches. You think today is Tuesday, or maybe the second Tuesday this week. Days blur together in the gloom. Time stretches and contracts like the leather on your boots, depending on humidity, morale, and number of spontaneous rodent incidents. Speaking of which, rats. You spot one now, scuttling along the beam overhead. Fat, confident, and possibly named Reginald. He pauses to clean his whiskers, then disappears into a crevice. You're not even mad. He pays rent in morale. You sit down on your stool, the one that wobbles. You've tried to fix it, but it seems determined to maintain its one-legged rebellion. You rest your torch in a sconce, stretch your back until it cracks in 3 places, and take a long, deep breath. The dungeon exhales with you, wet, sour, oddly comforting. Outside, a bell tolls. Noon. Probably. That means you're due for your half loaf of turnip bread and your daily cup of wine, which is mostly vinegar and optimism. But first, one last round of the cells, just in case someone managed to tunnel out in the past 10 minutes using a spoon in a dream. Such is the life of a dungeon keeper. Not heroic, not glamorous, but surprisingly stable. Unless, of course, you count the inmates, the walls, the ceiling, or your stool. You start your second walkthrough of the morning with all the enthusiasm of someone polishing the same rusty spoon for the seventh time. Your torch is getting low again. You'll need to replace it soon, but the last time you went for a fresh one, you walked in on the cook trying to distill soup into liquor. No one was wearing pants. The corridor echoes with the shuffle of feet and the occasional cough that sounds like a dying accordion. The floor is damp perpetually, and you've long given up on figuring out if that's from leaks, spills, or something far worse. It's best not to ask. If it moves, poke it. If it doesn't, also poke it. As you pass cell 4, you hear someone whisper your name, or at least the nickname you've earned down here, Grimtoe. No one remembers why. It might be the limp, or the time you accidentally stepped in something that hissed. Either way, you nod solemnly and pretend you didn't hear. A prisoner named Ulrich reaches out through the bars and tries to hand you something. You pause. It's a rat skull, cleaned and tied with a bit of string. For protection, he says, against the dreams. You take it. Because what else are you going to do? Refuse a gift in this economy? You thank him with a grunt and move on. Now the proud owner of your first piece of dungeon jewelry. And then it happens. Your least favorite part of the day. Someone's missing. You feel it in your bones before you even confirm it. Cell 7. The bars are bent. A smear of something reddish trails towards the drainage pit. You sigh so hard your torch flickers. You look inside. No one. Just straw, a discarded bowl, and a very smug-looking spider. You glance down the hallway. No signs of struggle, no guards sounding alarms, no noble kicking in the dungeon door demanding answers, which means, as usual, no one knows but you. You kick the wall. It gives slightly. The mortar in this place has the consistency of mashed peas and smells like them too. Historians still argue whether escape from medieval dungeons was common or simply dramatized over time. Some records show tunnels dug with spoons, others mention bribery, and at least one includes a rather enthusiastic chicken. In your case, it's usually the back wall. It leaks. It crumbles. It makes a great friend for prisoners with patience and mild claustrophobia. You grab the bell. The bell, by the way, is not elegant. It's a bent frying pan tied to a rope. You ring it by whacking it with your fist, which you do now, loudly. The sound echoes up through the floorboards into the guards' quarters. You wait. Nothing. You hit it again, harder. Still nothing. Eventually, a face appears at the hatch above. "What?" comes the voice. It's Gregor, the day guard. Gregor is shaped like a barrel and smells like one. You explain, calmly, that a prisoner is missing. Gregor grunts and disappears. You think he went to report it. You're not sure. He might have just gone back to sleep. You go back to cell 7 and crouch near the bent bars. Yep. Definitely wiggled loose. You make another mental note, possibly your fifth today, to request repairs. Again, you head toward the pit. The trail ends there, at the drainage grate. It's wide enough for a body, if the body were determined, and, say, deeply malnourished, or very flexible. The grate's still in place, but only barely. You tug it. It lifts. Of course it does. You stare down into the darkness, which somehow looks darker than your current darkness. It smells like old onions and judgment. You consider your options. Option 1, go down and find the prisoner yourself. Option 2, report it and let Gregor not care. Option 3, Declare the prisoner legally dead and give their cell to the next person who steals a pie. You pick option 1 because you're the kind of dungeon keeper who cares. Or more accurately, the kind who gets blamed when things go wrong. You lower yourself into the hole. The walls are slimy. The drop is short but deeply undignified. Your boots squelch. You mutter things not suitable for polite dinner conversation. The tunnel is narrow, barely wide enough to crawl. You light a fresh torch from the stub you carried, and its light reveals nothing good, just more tunnel. You crawl, grunting, scraping your elbows on stone, mentally composing your resignation letter for the 6th time this month. And then, movement. Not a prisoner, not a rat. Worse, it's a badger. A large, very unimpressed badger, occupying the tunnel like it pays rent. It stares at you. You stare at it. Neither of you blink. You back away slowly. Badgers are not to be trifled with. Everyone knows that. You climb back up, out of breath, out of dignity, and now moderately allergic to badgers. The prisoner clearly didn't go that way. Either they found another path, or the badger did. You return to the corridor. One of the other prisoners looks at you and grins. Find what you were looking for? You don't answer. Instead, you pull out a bit of chalk and update the board by the entrance. It reads, Escapes this week. Successfully recaptured. 0 blamed, 1 you. You update the last number with a sigh. Then you return to your stool, which has now lost a 4th leg. You sit anyway. It's the only furniture you have. As you adjust the rat skull amulet now hanging from your belt, you wonder, just briefly, if this job will kill you, or if you've already died, and this is the part no one warned you about. Then again, you have a torch, a wall to lean on, and the company of a possibly haunted badger somewhere below your floorboards. Life, in its own deeply questionable way, goes on. You know who's always around when you don't want them. Rats. Big ones, small ones, some with battle scars, some with ambitions, and some with names, because naming them is the only thing keeping you from going completely bonkers. There's Reginald, of course, the aristocrat of the beams. Then there's Three Tooth, who guards the grain stores with more vigilance than the actual guards. And finally, there's Francine, who once dragged off a prisoner's sandal and built a tiny bed with it. You respect Francine. Rats are more than co-workers. They're roommates. They're companions. They're occasionally your only source of entertainment, especially when one of them gets stuck in the soup kettle and sparks a full-blown moral crisis. Do you eat it? Or is it now your coworker? Today, the rats are especially energetic. You spot 5 of them doing laps around a mop bucket. One leaps into it, and the others cheer. Or at least, you imagine they do. You've started attributing personalities to them, and frankly, they seem more supportive than your supervisor upstairs. Historians still debate just how bad the rat problem really was in medieval dungeons. Some records suggest it was manageable with cats. Others insist it was raining rodents. You're firmly in the reigning camp. You once saw a rat ride a pigeon out the window. That image is now your definition of freedom. You go to check the grain stash. It's kept in a wooden crate secured with a rusty latch and an implied threat. You open it, slowly, and yep, chewed. Again. The top layer is gone, hollowed out like someone took a ladle to it. You jab your finger into the hole and come out with a handful of crumbs and one tiny turd. Delicious. You decide to stir the grain and call it aeration. At least you're not alone in your suffering. The prisoners hate the rats too, though sometimes they leave out crumbs in the hopes the rodents will carry messages, like tiny, squeaky couriers of doom. One guy tried to teach a rat to spell using dried peas. It went about as well as you'd expect. He ate the peas. You try to patch the hole in the grain crate using old parchment and wax. It holds for approximately 6 seconds. The rats wait politely until you walk away before resuming their buffet. You nod respectfully. Tacticians, everyone. You shift your attention to a new problem. The corridor smells different, worse. That's saying something, because the dungeon's normal scent is a complex bouquet of body odor, rot, smoke, and medieval despair. But this is new. Like someone boiled cabbage in a shoe and then buried it for 3 weeks. You follow your nose. It leads to cell 8, home of Toothy Gerald, who once claimed to be a dentist but clearly thought dentistry involved actual teeth collection. You approach with caution. Inside, Gerald is holding a rat, alive. I named him Clarence, he says proudly. He tells me things. You don't respond. You just back away and make a note to put a little chalk X next to his name on the wall. Not because he's dangerous, but because he's achieved a level of mental decay you're honestly kind of jealous of. As you move to the next cell, your boot crunches on something. You look down, breadcrumbs. You follow them like a sad medieval Hansel. They lead to a pile of discarded hay. You poke it with a stick. More crumbs, more hay. Then, movement. You jump back, stick raised, heart pounding. It's a rat with a tiny hat. Okay, not a hat, exactly. It's a button. But it's perched atop its head with an elegance you didn't know rodents could possess. You salute. The rat stares, unimpressed, and trots off. You make a note. Maybe you've been down here too long. Maybe the rats are developing culture, a rodent renaissance, led by Sir Francine and her button knights. You head to the storage alcove to look for traps. Not the metal ones you ran out months ago, but the wooden hope boxes you designed yourself. Just a stick, a string, and a scrap of cheese. So far, they've caught 2 socks, a pigeon, and a very startled beetle. But hey, hope is important. You check the traps. Empty. You reset one with a sliver of moldy cheddar and whisper an encouraging word to the trap. You've got this. Back in the corridor, the prisoners are starting to stir. Someone is singing again. Something about turnips this time. Another is arguing with his own shoe. You nod at both. It's going to be one of those afternoons. You head back to your stool, which has now given up completely and is just a pile of splinters, and lean against the wall. It's damp, of course, but by now, that feels like a warm embrace. You close your eyes for just a moment, and then squeaking. A lot of squeaking. You open your eyes to find Reginald and 3 lesser rats dragging your piece of turnip bread toward the drainage grate. You lock eyes. It's a silent standoff. Then you sigh and let them have it. They've earned it. Probably. And besides, if you eat any more turnip this week, your soul might actually try to leave your body. The rats vanish into the shadows. You pull your cloak around you. It doesn't help, but it's the gesture that counts. And you think, just for a second, about what your life could have been. A blacksmith, maybe, or a cobbler. But no, you had to become this. A rat therapist with a mop and a chronic vitamin D deficiency. A rat skitters across your foot. You don't flinch. You barely blink. You just whisper, "Tell Francine I said hello." And life continues. You glance around your workspace, if you can call it that. A crooked table, 1 broken shelf, and a rusted nail holding up a length of rope that used to be a belt. Welcome to your medieval office, where the tools of the trade include things like buckets, bone saws, branding irons, and a healthy sense of existential detachment. You open your equipment chest. It's not a chest, really, just a crate that smells vaguely of pickled herring and failure. Inside, two sets of manacles, one too rusty to open, a branding iron shaped like a question mark. Nobody remembers why. Three bone handled tools that are probably medical, but might be ceremonial, and a length of rope that's seen more drama than a royal marriage. And of course, your bucket, your beloved, irreplaceable, always slightly leaking bucket. You carry this thing everywhere for water, for filth, for collections. It's your Swiss Army knife, except it only has one function, and that function is containment. You patch its cracks with wax, cloth, and optimism. One day, you'll give it a name. Maybe today. You grab the poker. Not for warmth, there is none, but because you're on your way to do the morning sweep, and sometimes things hide in corners, like rats, or teeth, or both. You walk past the cell with the scribbler, the one drawing strange symbols on the walls with soot and fingernails. His latest masterpiece? A spiral made of X's and tiny stick men with no heads. He says it's a map. You say it's Thursday. Historians still argue whether dungeon tools were actually used as frequently as stories suggest, or if they were more for intimidation, props to keep order without the mess. You're inclined to believe the latter, mostly because cleaning up after enthusiastic interrogations is, well, it lingers. You open the supply cupboard and take inventory of your medieval Home Depot. One dull knife, a set of thumb screws that squeak more than they twist, a jar of what might be leeches, but might just be raisins in vinegar. You sniff it. Regret. There's a rag on the floor. It used to be white. Now it's an abstract art piece titled Life Choices. You drape it over the poker handle like it's some kind of sad little flag of defeat. Next up is your broom. It has 3 bristles, total. You drag it along the floor anyway, pushing more dirt into cracks than you remove. But hey, appearances matter. If someone ever inspects the place, you want them to know you made an effort. You once saw a noblewoman faint just from looking at the floor down here. Honestly, you were impressed she lasted that long. Now and then, you do get inspected, once a month officially. In reality, twice a year, when the local baron remembers you exist. The last inspection involved a man in velvet shoes slipping in a puddle and screaming at you for ruining his dignity. You offered him the rag. He declined. Your rag does smell like cheese and melancholy. The branding irons are cold. You haven't used them in weeks, thank the saints. One is shaped like a letter M, but no one knows what it stands for. Murder? Madness? Maybe this wasn't a good idea? You once branded a plank of wood just to see if it worked. It didn't. You reorganized the tools again, even though no one else touches them. It's something to do. You line them up by type, by size, by existential threat. You consider creating a color-coded system, but everything's the same color. Brownish iron. Or ironish brown. Next, you pick up the bone saw. Not for use, just to polish it. Or at least remove the dried mystery substance on the blade. You scrape it off with a bit of shell and squint. It's either old blood or soup. Could be both. You once saw the cook use this saw to slice a loaf of bread. You didn't eat that day. Your fingers find a tiny chisel, the kind used for etching names into stone. You found it in the corner one day, wedged behind a broken tile. The handle's worn smooth. Someone used it a lot. The only name it's ever carved under your watch? Yours. Into your bucket. It now reads Gerald, because that felt dignified. You carry Gerald, the bucket, with both hands now. It's time for cleaning, which means throwing stale water at stains and pretending you're improving things. You splash a cell floor. The prisoner in that cell gives you a thumbs up and calls you Florence Nightingale. You don't know who that is, but it sounds sarcastic. Another prisoner watches you from the shadows. You nod at him. He nods back. Mutual respect between two people who both know this place is slowly eating your souls. In the far corner of the dungeon is the tool closet, which is really just a hole in the wall covered by a plank. Inside, spare chains, a length of rope that once tried to strangle you on its own, and a jar of grease that smells like regret. You re-grease the hinges on Cell Nine's door, which has started squealing like a banshee. The squeak stops. The door promptly falls off. You pick it up, lean it back into place, and jam a stone under the frame. It'll hold, for now. You tell yourself that a lot. There's an odd comfort in your tools. They're terrible, outdated, unsafe, and probably cursed, but they're yours. You've repaired them more times than you can count, and they've only injured you a few times this week. Someone coughs, long and rattling. You don't even look up. It's your new normal, just like the sound of dripping, the smell of mold, and the faint sense that one of the tools is judging you, probably the bone saw. You finish your cleaning circuit. Gerald the bucket is lighter now, and your back is heavier. You place the tools back in their crate, close the lid, and sit on it like it's a throne of iron and filth. For a moment, you imagine a different life. A clean apron, a window, a job that doesn't involve scraping teeth off a wall with a butter knife. Then a rat runs across your foot. Right, back to work. You're midway through sorting a pile of chains because, of course, they've tangled themselves into one giant clanking octopus. When you hear the sound that sends shivers down any dungeon keeper's spine, silence. The kind of silence that isn't just quiet, but wrong. No moaning, no coughing, no rhythmic spoon tapping against bars. Just quiet. You stop what you're doing. Even the rats seem to pause. You listen. Nothing. You stand. You step into the corridor. The torches flicker like they're in on the secret. Then you see it. The door to cell 2. It's wide open, not ajar. Open. You run. Well, shuffle quickly with determination and a slight limp. Inside, the straw is disturbed. The wall is damp with fresh smears. The shackles are swinging gently, like someone just slipped out of them. You mutter something between a prayer and a curse and grab your keyring, except you already know it won't help, because whoever was in there is not in there anymore. You do a quick scan. There's a tunnel, shallow, newly dug. It leads, well, nowhere. It's more of a start than a success. A decoy. You poke it with a broom handle. No body, no trap, just a pile of dirt and ambition. Historians still argue whether escapes were due more to poor construction or poor attention. You're currently representing both. You retrace your steps. Someone must have seen something, or heard, or smelt. Probably smelt. This place has a language of odors. There's the usual bouquet, damp, sweat, rotting straw, but now something else. Something sharper, fresher. You sniff. Mint. Mint? You follow it instinctively. A dungeon that smells like mint is immediately suspicious. You turn the corner, past the cells, and head toward the back, near the pantry and the old stone archway you swore was just decorative. And there it is, a trail of crushed mint leaves leading toward a broken section of wall. Not large enough for a full escape, but someone's tried. You poke through the hole and find a pouch. Inside, more mint, a bit of dried meat, and, oddly, a feather quill. You pocket it. It feels important, or maybe collectible. You haven't decided. Back in the hallway, the silence continues. Then, just as suddenly, noise. Laughter. Not yours. Not the prisoner's. A voice from upstairs. Oh no. The noble inspector has arrived. You hear the clomp of over-polished boots descending. The scent of rosewater wafts down like a taunt. You suck in your gut, straighten your tunic, still damp, still tragic, and shuffle toward the main stairwell. Down comes Lord Algernon Pritchworth the Third, whose name is longer than his patience. Behind him trails a scribe holding a ledger, a silk kerchief over their nose, and a look of deep regret. Algernon surveys the space, like he's been asked to vacation inside a compost bin. Dungeon Master. Ah, Gimbleton. Is it? He asks, glancing at your chest like your name might be pinned there. It's just Grimtoe, my lord, you murmur. Unfortunate. You nod. It usually is. He walks the corridor, tutting. He pokes a wall with his cane. Damp. Yes, my lord. He lifts a bowl with 2 fingers. Sniffs. Recoils. Drops it. Is that porridge? Yes, my lord, Tuesdays. He checks his boots for damage, frowns, and sighs dramatically. We must ensure these prisoners are suffering adequately, yes? But within decorum. Of course, my lord. He stops outside a cell where a prisoner is drawing a picture of a chicken with charcoal. This one seems whimsical. I can remove the chicken, my lord. See that you do. He waves the scribe forward. Make note. Whimsical inmates. Unacceptable. The scribe writes it down. The prisoner flips you off with both hands. You move to the far end of the corridor as Algernon continues his inspection. He pauses at the mop bucket, stares, tilts his head. Why is this water brown? It's the clean water, my lord. He shudders. Next, he spots the broken door. That appears to be off. We call it a freestanding entryway, my lord. He nods slowly, like that might be a real thing. Then, disaster. He notices cell 2. Wasn't there another prisoner here? You freeze. He's on a walk? The scribe suggests dryly. You nod. Very short leash. Algernon frowns deeply. See that he's found. I'll be reporting this. You force a smile, delighted to assist. He gives the dungeon one last sniff, one final scoff, and then swirls his cloak so dramatically it nearly knocks over the rat skull display you've started curating. Moments later, they're gone. You exhale. You slump. You whisper, I need a raise. The silence returns. So do the rats. You hear Reginald scratching at something behind your stool. Probably your dignity. You begin another round, this time dragging the mop for show. The chain pile's still tangled. The walls are still weeping. A prisoner down the hall has started singing again, this time a heartfelt ballad about cabbage. And somewhere out there, loose in the night, is a prisoner with a pouch of mint and a very questionable sense of stealth. You shake your head and sigh. Just another perfectly normal day in the dungeon. You've only just started wringing out your mop, an exercise in futility if ever there was one, when the second worst sound of the day echoes down the corridor. The delivery bell. There's a bell at the far end of the hallway, up by the iron hatch. When it rings, it means someone has sent something down from the world above, something they didn't want to carry, something they probably didn't even want to touch. You brace yourself and head up the slippery stone steps. Each one is a lawsuit waiting to happen, though medieval litigation mostly involves pitchforks and angry mobs. You reach the hatch. You open it. And of course, it's not food. It's a body. A new inmate, tied in an undignified heap, like a sack of barley with knees. He groans. Good. Alive. Barely. Next to him, a scroll, nailed shut with wax and sealed in red. You tear it open. The letter reads, Thief. Cabbage related incident. Questionable noble lineage. Temporary placement. Temporary. Meaning, you're stuck with him until someone forgets, dies, or sends another scroll. You drag the man by his ankles, gently ish, down the hall, trailing groans and fresh grime. He mutters something about misunderstood agricultural reform. You nod. You've heard worse. You assign him to cell 6. The others eye him like wolves who've gone gluten free and finally spotted a carb. You lock the cell. He collapses into the straw with the resignation of someone who just realized this place has no pillows, no plumbing, and no policy for returning souls to senders. You hang the scroll on your wall of shame, which is really just a damp plank where you post all the official decrees, half of which are illegible due to mildew or angry prisoners using them for toilet paper. This scroll joins the collection. It adds to the general ambience of legal negligence. You check the new inmate's file again. Age, uncertain. Crime, theft of dignity. Favorite food, turnips, under protest. Occupation, minor poet. Fantastic, a bard. You sigh, because what every dungeon needs is a bard. Historians still debate the exact role of bards in medieval society, whether they were esteemed keepers of oral history or just the medieval version of a guy with a ukulele at a party who won't leave. You suspect the latter. Sure enough, within 10 minutes, he's singing. It's off key. It involves rhyming dungeon with onion. You resist the urge to throw your shoe, mostly because it's your only shoe. You walk down the hall and make the rounds again. It's like clockwork. Except the clock is broken, late, and possibly plotting against you. Cell 3 is arguing about taxes with himself. Cell 5 is asleep upside down, like a bat again. Cell 9 has gone oddly quiet. You pause outside 9. Listen. Inside, a prisoner stares at the wall, not speaking, not moving, just staring. You ask, Everything all right? He nods, still not blinking. You move on. You grab a jug of water from your hydration corner, which is just a barrel with a questionable lid and a scoop that doubles as a ladle and footstool. You pour a cup for the new inmate. He accepts it with the exaggerated gratitude of someone who's been through exactly 3 kinds of vinegar-based punishment today. You ask his name. Elias, he says, of nowhere in particular. Figures. You nod and give him the rules. Don't bite. Don't scream after midnight. Don't name the rats without proper introduction. He accepts them without protest. Then he says, Has anyone ever left here for good? You blink. No one asks that. You say, Occasionally, usually feet first. He stares at his cup. So, not a lot of advancement opportunities then. You reply, Depends. How fast can you dig with a spoon? He chuckles, then coughs, then immediately regrets laughing. You check the torch in the corridor. Almost out. You switch it for a new one and realize you're down to your last 3, and one of them is half candle. You head to the storeroom, if you can call it that. It's more like a glorified cupboard. Inside, 1 loaf of bread, suspiciously green. 1 small keg labeled wine that smells like it started thinking about becoming vinegar. And 1 bundle of torches bound with twine and something that looks suspiciously like human hair. You take the torches. You sniff the bread. Regret. You grab the wine. It sloshes reluctantly. like even the liquid is trying to escape. Back in the corridor, the bard is reciting something about lost love and fermented beets. The other prisoners boo. One throws a rock, another throws his hope. You pass a guard at the upper level. He leans down and says, "You hear about the storm?" "What storm?" "Big one, rolling in from the west. They're saying it might flood the lower wards." You glance at the walls, already wet, already weeping. Flooding? What would that even look like? Buckets bailing out entire corridors? Rats building arcs? You teaching prisoners how to swim in 2 feet of sewage? Great. You make a note. Build emergency raft. Materials. Stool leg, bucket lid, prayer. Then it begins. Drip, 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 drip. You look up. Rainwater is leaking from a fresh crack in the ceiling. A slow, steady drip landing right on your notes table. You sigh, move the table. The drip moves with it. You put your hand to the stone. Cold, damp. Not good. The prisoners haven't noticed yet. You've got time. Probably. You head back to your bucket. Good old Gerald. You whisper to him, "Might need you tonight, buddy." Gerald gurgles ominously. You give him a pat. Just another normal evening. With new prisoners, leaking ceilings, questionable wine, and a bard who thinks rhyming spleen with latrine is art. The storm's coming, and you're not ready. But honestly, you never are. You wake up to the unmistakable sensation of water slapping your ankle, not gently, not politely, but the kind of slap that says, "Hey, your floor is now a lake." You sit up fast, or as fast as someone can when sleeping against a damp wall with a rat on their knee. Reginald blinks at you, unimpressed, then leaps off and vanishes into the shadows with all the poise of someone who saw this coming and packed early. You stand carefully because the floor is now a shallow soup of water, straw, and whatever dreams gave up and decomposed. The storm has arrived, and it's brought its entire extended family. You grab Gerald. Bucket, not person. He's already half full, having caught the leak from above with more efficiency than anything else in the building. The torches are sputtering. The air is thicker, wetter, more moist, if you will, which is, as always, a terrible word for terrible situations. You slosh down the corridor, checking for the usual problems. Collapsed ceiling? Not yet. Escaped prisoners? Not yet. Someone trying to catch fish with a spoon? Yes, Elias, the new bard, has rigged a net made of shoelaces and is scooping it through a puddle. For morale, he explains, and possibly lunch. You squint. You're not allowed to be optimistic here. He nods solemnly. I'll suppress it. You keep moving. Cell 4 is bailing water with a bowl. Cell 7 is floating on his straw mattress, arms crossed like some kind of medieval cruise passenger. Cell 2, of course, is still empty. You really should do something about that. The prisoners are adapting in the way all organisms do. Badly, but enthusiastically. Historians still debate how common flooding was in medieval dungeons. Some claim they were built with drainage in mind. Others believe the builders got distracted halfway through by a chicken or plague outbreak and forgot. In your case, the drains exist, but they drain upward. You've never figured out how. You head to the back storage alcove. There's a plank of wood you've been saving for emergencies. Today qualifies. You prop it across the corridor as a makeshift bridge. The prisoners cheer. One begins charging tolls. You confiscate his bowl. The water's rising. Slowly, steadily, with that smug inevitability only water and taxes have. You climb up to the upper corridor and bang on the hatch. Gregor answers. chewing something that may or may not be food. Storm, you say? He nods. Yep. Water's inside now. Yep. Do we have a plan? He scratches his head. I think the plan is float. You stare. He shrugs, closes the hatch. Right. You head back down. A prisoner is paddling a mop bucket. Another is trying to teach rats to pull it like a chariot. You'd be impressed if it weren't your mop bucket and your rats. Elias is now singing a ballad about floods and redemption. It's better than his cabbage song, but only just. You tell him to keep it down. He says it's helping morale. You tell him morale is illegal. The torches are fizzling now, the lower ones extinguished entirely. Shadows creep up the walls like mold that got tenure. You distribute candles. You only have 5, and 3 are partially eaten. No one asks why. Everyone just accepts it. You pass by the forgotten corner, the one behind the supply crates. There, you find a small hole in the wall, about rat-sized. You kneel, hold up a candle. On the other side, dry space. An old storage tunnel, long sealed off, or not. The hole leads into a forgotten crawl space. You press your face closer. You hear wind, dry wind, possibly freedom, or a tomb. Hard to say in this line of work. You debate telling the others. You don't. You grab a board and block the hole. They don't need hope. Hope leads to plans. Plans lead to holes. Holes lead to badgers. You've been down this road. Back in the main corridor, someone has started playing music on a spoon and bowl, rhythmically. With intention, it's oddly catchy. You stomp your boot. The music stops. You resume your patrol, now more a paddle than a march. The water reaches your knees. You begin moving the straw out of each cell, one handful at a time, before it becomes a mold terrarium. It's slow work, wet work, soul work. One prisoner whispers, I saw a fish. You whisper back, I saw my will to live float past an hour ago. A sudden crash, you turn. Cell 9's wall has collapsed inward. Not catastrophically, just enough to dump 3 gallons of sludge and a confused frog into the cell. You sigh. Grab Gerald. Begin scooping. Gerald groans. You groan. The frog croaks, like it's trying to harmonize. You move straw into a high corner. You shift buckets. You tip out water. You wring out your soul. At some point, you rest against the wall, just for a minute. You close your eyes. Then you hear it. Laughter. Not cruel, not mocking. Just laughter. Several prisoners laughing at the spoon music, at the makeshift raft someone's built from old planks and empty soup tins, at the ridiculousness of it all. And you, sitting knee-deep in sewer water with a rat crown and a rusted poker, start laughing too. It feels strange, warm, dangerous. You stop yourself. Laughter leads to hope. Hope leads to plans. Plans lead to badgers. You mop. You sigh. You check the water level, still rising. You mark it with a piece of chalk. You draw a line, then another, one for every inch. And next to them, you draw a little face, smiling. Then you walk away, because tomorrow, the water will still be here. The bard will still sing. The rats will still organize. The bucket will still leak. But for now, the dungeon floats. You spend the next several hours rediscovering just how many things in the dungeon float that really, really shouldn't. Like the bread, like the latrine cover, like one of your boots, which has now sailed off towards cell 8 with a rat on board, looking extremely pleased with its promotion to Admiral. You slosh after it, but it's too late. Admiral Francine has declared maritime sovereignty, and you are, for all intents and purposes, a landlubber again. You lean against the nearest wall, half soaked, half sane, and begin your daily inventory. Because even in the middle of a flood and psychological collapse, someone has to track the spoons. Item 1: 17 iron spoons. 3 are bent. 2 are being used as instruments. 1 is missing and believed to be inside the wall. We do not ask why. Item 2: 4 bowls. 1 is cracked, 1 floats upside down, and now houses a small colony of damp straw and regret. Item 3: 3 buckets, including Gerald. 1 is currently hosting a rat orchestra. Another smells so strongly of pickled fish it has acquired sentience. Item 4: 1 stool, or rather 1 former stool, now an abstract wooden sculpture titled Collapse. You scribble this all down on your inventory slate, which has been soaked 3 times, bitten once, and now requires squinting to read. A prisoner floats by on a door. You ignore him. You check on the torches, still burning but low. You rotate them like medieval light bulbs, switching the lower, wetter ones with the dry upper backups. You wish for lanterns, or better yet, electricity. Or even better, an early retirement. At some point, Elias, the bard, declares this the great deluge of Cell Block C and begins composing an epic. It rhymes. Poorly. He climbs onto a crate and begins narrating everyone's suffering like some kind of damp Homer. You there with the pail? Who's soggy and pale? Let us honor his mop, which never did fail. You stare at him, then at Gerald. Gerald bubbles. You whisper, you're not a symbol. The ceiling above begins to drip again. Fresh water, not sewer. This is good news only if you enjoy getting wet vertically as well as horizontally. You glance at the far corridor, the one near the stairs, the hatch, and the elusive outside. You think of sunshine, of warmth, of shoes. You remember those things like they're fairy tales. Back in the cells, morale is oddly up. Prisoners have formed raft alliances, tying together bits of wood and crate into floating islands. One is flying a flag made from underpants. Another is charging straw rent for prime raft space. Historians still argue whether camaraderie among prisoners was common or rare. Some believe shared misery created strong bonds. Others think it created riots. In your experience, it creates extremely passive-aggressive towel sharing and complex barter systems involving beetles. You confiscate a beetle. You sit on your crate, your last dry surface, and glance at the inspection slate again. Tomorrow, another review is scheduled. You laugh. Not because it's funny, but because if Lord Algernon sets foot down here now, he'll either faint or spontaneously combust. You consider writing a letter of warning. Then remember the last scroll you sent was used to plug a hole in cell 6, so instead, you sigh and carve good luck into the wall with a nail. You mop again. By this point, the mop is more symbolic than useful, but rituals matter. One prisoner offers you a biscuit. You refuse. You've seen where he stores them. Another offers to trade you a dry sock for 5 minutes of torch time. You decline. You've learned to be wary of any sock that maintains eye contact. Then disaster. Cell 3 begins to bubble, not from a prisoner, not from singing, but from below. The stones rise. Water seeps up, not in drips, but in a gurgling geyser of mud, insects, and historical trauma. You run over, which is generous. You squish over. You peer in. A chunk of floor has collapsed, revealing a dark pit below, and you know what that means. The undercellar. You were told it was sealed, abandoned, forgotten. You were told wrong. You peer inside. It smells like wet parchment and bones. A faint breeze rises from the hole, cold, unsettling, and carrying the distant sound of humming. You back away slowly. You throw a crate over it. Problem solved. For now. You resume your rounds. The prisoners are busy crafting passports for their rafts, complete with drawings, names like Lord Watertoe, and questionable national anthems. You confiscate the passports, but you smile, just a little. In the far corner, a prisoner with chalk draws a map of the dungeon, but this time it includes little boats, wave lines, and a large octopus labeled Gregory. You nod. Gregory's real. You've met him. He stole your sandwich. You write a note to yourself. Check on cell 3 collapse, possibly underworld portal. Do not fall in. You tack the note to Gerald. He's earned it. The water hasn't risen further in the last hour. This is good. It means either the flood is slowing, or the dungeon is now officially full. You wipe your brow. Your sleeve is soaked. Your soul is damp. Your optimism has gone out for tea and never returned. And yet, you're still here, still sweeping, still muttering, still defending the title of most competent person in a room full of fungus and felons. You light a candle. It flickers. You lean back against the wall. You close your eyes. And for just a moment, you let yourself imagine the sea, because if the dungeon's a boat now, you might as well dream of sailing. You awake. Not because it's morning, you haven't seen a sunrise in 7 years, but because the bard is playing music again. This time with a hollowed soup bone and what sounds suspiciously like humming through his nose. You groan. You've developed an aversion to joy that borders on allergic. You splash to your feet, squelch, squish, creak, and realize something's changed. The water level is the same, but the mood is different. The prisoners are up early, whispering, huddled. That's never good. Whispering in a dungeon is like humming in a horror movie. It never ends in cake. You trudge closer. One group has gathered around cell 12. They part as you approach. Inside, a rat. Not just any rat, a rat with a message. Strapped to its back, crudely, but with intent, is a tiny scroll. Fastened with string, the rat is licking its paw, unconcerned. You kneel. Reach in slowly. Offer a piece of bread. The rat sniffs. Accepts the deal. You retrieve the scroll. Unroll it. Inside, a drawing. A crude, scratchy map. Leading somewhere. No words. Just lines, a star, and a little X. You stare. Someone has taught the rats to carry messages. Someone. Or something. Elias peers over your shoulder. The rat resistance, he whispers. You sigh. There is no rat resistance. He grins. That's what they want you to think. Historians still debate the use of rats in communication. Some say they were trained to find food and occasionally acted as message carriers in sieges. Others believe that's optimistic nonsense. You now believe anything is possible. Because your dungeon has become a floating society run by rodents and bardic propaganda, you pin the map to the wall. Label it, possibly important, possibly a rodent joke. You check the prisoner roster again, cross-reference it with your bucket list. Yes, actual list, written on the inside of Gerald. It reads, mop entire corridor, completed. Eat warm meal, pending. Avoid plague, in progress. Retire before spontaneous combustion. You add 5. Investigate rat conspiracy. 6. Avoid Elias's musical. Speaking of which, Elias is now staging a one-man play on a raft with sock puppets. He calls it Floodlight, a Dungeon Tragedy. You confiscate the socks. He replaces them with beetles. You confiscate the beetles. You're losing this war. You pass by cell 6 and notice something you didn't expect. A book, not a scroll, not a drawing. A real book. You pick it up carefully. It's damp, swollen, and smells like vinegar and ink, but it's readable. The title, A Modest Manual for Torture-Free Incarceration. You blink. You didn't even know such literature existed. You open to the first page. There's a diagram of positive reinforcement. Using porridge and polite conversation. You laugh so hard, you accidentally inhale a fly. The book must have come from the upper levels. A mistake. Or a joke. Or maybe someone trying to reform the dungeon from afar. You tuck it under your cloak. Not for use, just curiosity. Later, you find Cell 5 painting on the walls with berry juice. Not because he's inspired, because he's bored. He paints a sun, then a tree, then a little stick figure dangling from a cloud, waving cheerfully. You compliment his use of perspective. He says, "Thank you. That's me escaping." You nod solemnly. Ambitious. Down in Cell 2, still empty, still cursed, you notice something new. Footprints. Wet. Small. Leading in, then vanishing. You don't like that. You toss a clove of garlic into the cell and shut the door. For luck. On the way back, you find a prisoner meditating, cross-legged. Floating slightly, you blink. He opens one eye. The water stills the mind. You reply, "The mold stills my nose." You move on. You pass Gerald. He's full again. But this time, with something different. Little folded notes. Dozens of them. Each scribbled in different handwriting. You unfold one. "Can we get more straw?" Another. "Please stop singing about intestines." Another. "What happened to the cat?" You pause. "There's been no cat in weeks." You write back. Budget cuts. You place the reply back into Gerald. He burps. You update your list again. Confirm existence of ghost cat. You pause near the entrance stairway. The hatch creaks. A gust of wind slips through cold and sharp. You look up. A pigeon flies in, circles, drops something, flies out. You stare at the floor. A small bundle wrapped in twine. Inside, cheese, actual real edible cheese. You gasp. So do the prisoners. Elias whispers, "The surface remembers us." You shake your head. It's probably a prank, but still, you slice the cheese into 21 pieces, evenly, mostly. You hand them out. Tiny soft cubes. The first non-turnip thing in weeks. They eat in silence. Reverent. You pocket the rind for yourself. A trophy. And as the torchlight flickers low and the water laps at your boots again, you sit, exhausted, wet, smelling faintly of cheese and candle wax. And for a moment you think, this isn't so bad. Then a rat bites your toe, and you remember who you are. A dungeon keeper, a reluctant bard wrangler, a mop wizard, a man one flood away from growing gills. And still, somehow, the most responsible adult in the room. You start the day, though let's be honest, day is a generous term here, with a cough. The kind of deep, damp cough that echoes off stone walls and returns with passive-aggressive commentary. You check your reflection in a puddle, still alive. Barely. The water has receded a little, only ankle deep now. A blessing, if you ignore the mysterious slickness on the surface and the slight feeling that the puddles have personalities now. You wade past Gerald, who is quietly fermenting in the corner. Someone has added a sprig of rosemary to him. Why? Unclear. Possibly for flavor. You resume your mop duties, even though the mop itself now smells like betrayal and bad soup. You dunk it, swipe a square foot, and call it clean. Definitions are fluid here. Unlike the water, which is stubbornly thick. Cell 6 requests more air. You deliver it by waving your arms and humming. They seem satisfied. Elias, of course, has written another song. This one is about a bucket named Gerald, who falls in love with a mop named Sue and runs away to sea. It's not terrible. which, for him, is a breakthrough. You confiscate the manuscript anyway. He bows dramatically into his puddle. You move on. At the supply closet, you attempt to take inventory again. There are now 2.5 buckets. The point .5 is just a hoop and a dream, one torch stub, one bar of soap, carved into a chess set by the more artistic prisoners. 17 bugs, uninvited. 4 spoons, all slightly cursed. You sigh. You add soap chests to your mental museum of tragic hobbies. Historians still debate whether dungeon keepers were allowed breaks. Some suggest a rotation schedule. Others insist it was a live there until you die arrangement. You lean firmly toward the second, mostly because you haven't seen the sun since the cabbage riots of last winter. You lean on your mop and stare at the wall. A new carving appears overnight. 3 concentric circles and a rat holding a sword. You blink. The rats, it seems, are organizing. You leave it alone. The bard claims it's the sigil of the rodent knights of the shallow drain. You roll your eyes, but then someone in cell 10 starts humming the rat anthem, and honestly, it slaps. Later, Gregor drops in through the hatch, smelling of horse sweat and disappointment. He tosses you a bag. Supplies, he says. You open it. Contents: 1 onion, 2 dried turnips, a letter from the mayor's office saying, "Hang in there." You nod. Luxury. He spits on the floor, which is redundant at this point, and leaves. You consider sauteing the onion. Then remember you have no fire. You offer the onion to the prisoners. They elect a leader to guard it. You return to cell 2, still empty. Still wrong. You peek in. The floor is dry. Too dry. You toss a pebble inside. It doesn't land. It just vanishes. You close the door, gently. One prisoner claims he saw a shimmer in there last night. Another swears they heard a harp. You ignore both. You add another chalk mark to the door and label it. Definitely not Tuesday. You sit on your stool, which wobbles in a philosophical way. You open the torture-free manual again. Today's suggestion: empathy sessions. You scoff, but then for fun, you try it. You sit with cell 8. Ask how their day is. They blink. You blink. The silence grows until even the mold seems awkward. Eventually, the prisoner whispers, "I once had a goat named Timothy." You write that down. It feels important. You try cell 4 next. They cry for 5 straight minutes, then fall asleep mid-sob. You mark that as progress. You return to your stool, more tired than before. Elias approaches. He offers you a flower. Well, not a real flower. It's straw twisted and dyed with beet juice. Still, it's something. You accept it. You place it on your table, beside the rat skull, the spoon shrine, and your own growing sense of abstraction. The candle sputters again. You light another. You have 3 left. Each flicker is a countdown. You take a breath. And then the hatch slams open again. But this time, it's not Gregor. It's someone new. Armor clean. Stern, a noble messenger. You stand up straighter. Wipe your hands on the least awful part of your tunic. He announces, "By order of His Grace, the Duke of Malford-on-Shoe, this dungeon shall be inspected thoroughly tomorrow at dawn." You blink. Dawn? He nods. Thorough? He nods again. Very? You sigh. He hands you a scroll, tosses a silver coin on the table, which immediately sinks and leaves. Elias gasps. They're coming. Real nobles. With clipboards, you start making a list. Clean the walls. Relight all torches. Hide the bucket cult. Evict the frog. You look around. The walls sweat. The water stinks. The prisoners hum softly. And you are now the proud, exhausted, slightly damp manager of what is somehow the worst and most magical place in the kingdom. You lean back, close your eyes, and whisper to the ceiling, "Well, let's give them a show." You have less than 12 hours to make this place look like it's not actively decomposing in place. That's the task. You, a man with one shoe, three torches, and a bucket that may be sentient, are going to impress nobility. You begin by scrubbing the front entry stones. With what? A rag soaked in vinegar, wine, and desperation. The wine came from the emergency cask, which has been fermenting since the last dungeon-wide lice outbreak. It smells like pickled ambition and tastes worse. You scrub. It's symbolic, mostly. The grime isn't leaving. It's just getting rearranged. Gregor shows up briefly to drop off a fresh broom. Well, a stick with bristles vaguely attached. He calls it premium model. You pay him in 2 turnips and 1 emotional breakdown. Elias offers help. You hesitate. He's currently wearing a cloak made of wet straw and humming his own theme music. You assign him to wall inspiration, which he takes seriously. He draws murals. Huge, hopeful ones. Prisoners dancing, mops flying, a sun with a face. It's terrifying, but cheerful. You let it be. Historians still argue whether prison beautification existed outside propaganda. Some point to artwork etched into the walls by long-term inmates. Others claim anything more decorative than a moss patch was treasonous. You now understand both sides. You go cell by cell. You redistribute what dry straw remains. You collect every spoon. You redistribute the spoons. You separate the ones with names. You mop up the collapsed wall in cell 9 by shoving bricks vaguely into place and balancing a frog on top like a warning sign. You recheck cell 2. Still cold. Still empty. You stop questioning it. You pass cell 7. He's meditating again, floating, this time, a full inch off the ground. You say nothing. He nods. Respect. You enter the kitchen. It's a glorified shelf. You pull out all 3 loaves of bread. One is fossilized. One is missing. One is now more sponge than bread. You slice the third and arrange it on a tray. Presentation is key. The rat resistance sends another note. This one says, "We approve of the changes. Consider this your trial period." You blink. You write back, "Thank you for your patronage." You place the note in Gerald. Gerald gurgles. Affirmative. You return to your bucket list. Hide the sock puppets. Dust the rat shrine. Hang the motivational scroll. You nail a scroll to the main hallway. Pain is temporary. Porridge is forever. It's inspirational, sort of. The torchlight is dim. You split your last candle in 2. This makes 0 physical sense, but feels symbolic. The hallway glows and flickers. Someone has arranged pebbles into a little trail. You follow it. It leads to cell 12. Inside, a bouquet of mildew tied with string from the prisoners for luck. You take it. You try not to cry. Back in your office corner, which is also the latrine corner, but we don't talk about that. You clean your desk. By clean, we mean push everything into a box labeled "Do Not Open" unless the inspector insists. Elias shows up in a full ensemble. Bucket helmet, tunic tucked in, smile like a bard on payday. "I've prepared a speech," he announces. "No speeches," you mumble. "It rhymes." You sigh deeply. "Especially no rhyming speeches." He salutes with a spoon. You take a deep breath. You light the welcome torch. It sputters bravely. You adjust your tunic. It's still damp, still tragic, but you smooth it. You pace the hallway, nodding at each prisoner. They nod back. You reach the door. Sunlight, real sunlight. For a moment, you forget the smell, the rot, the years of leaks and creaks and emotional mildew. You remember you once wanted to be a scholar, or a baker, or alive. But somehow, here you are, dungeon keeper. And despite the absurdity, the rats, the toe-nibbling frogs, the spoon riots, the ghostly empty cell, you've made it work. You take one last sweep through the corridor. Cell 5 is whistling. Cell 3 offers a thumbs up. Cell 9 is still rebuilding his raft, this time with architectural blueprints. Cell 8 gives you a little figurine made from moldy soap. It looks like you. It's grotesque. You love it. You place it on your desk. The hallway is cleanish. The walls, mostly vertical. The smell, less aggressive. You breathe. You stand. You whisper to the torches, "Don't fail me now." And just as you take your position by the front, ready to greet the inspector with whatever fragments of dignity remain, the hatch creaks open. A figure appears, not a noble, not a soldier, a child, carrying a scroll, eyes wide, shoes polished, cloak freshly pressed. He hands you the scroll. You open it. Inspection postponed until next week. Apologies for inconvenience. Signed, Duke Mountford on shoe. You stare. You reread. You exhale. You drop the scroll. You sit down. Right in the water, which you no longer even notice. Behind you, the prisoners cheer. Elias begins composing. The rats form a conga line. You lie back, float slightly, and smile, because for now there is no inspection. Only puddles, porridge, poetry, and peace. The moment the inspection was canceled, the dungeon slipped back into its natural state, somewhere between organized chaos and a collapsing mushroom farm. The prisoners naturally celebrated. They formed an impromptu festival. There were games, there was music, there was interpretive dance. You didn't approve it, but you didn't stop it either, because you were still lying in the puddle, staring at the ceiling like it might offer life advice. It didn't. It offered a droplet, right in your eye. You sit up, sputtering. You make your way back to your desk, which now bears a "World's Dampest Boss" sign carved in soap by Cell 4. You leave it. It's not inaccurate. Gerald has something new floating inside him. A folded square of cloth. You fish it out. A handkerchief embroidered with the initials MC and an image of what appears to be a cat with a crown. You blink. The ghost cat has a brand now. You add it to the growing list. Investigate feline monarchy. Elias hands you a scroll. "My latest composition," he says, "inspired by your heroic floor floating." You open it. It's called "Elegy for a Moist Warden." You crumple it gently and feed it to the torch. "Too soon?" he asks. Too accurate." The hallway smells like burnt poetry and slightly warm cheese. You do another patrol. You notice something in cell 11, a small stack of pebbles, balanced just so. Perfect symmetry, 6 high. That's the signal. You bend down and check the corner. A rat is waiting. It blinks twice, then scurries off, leaving behind a seed, a sunflower seed. You have no sunflowers. You stare at it for 5 long seconds, then tuck it into your pocket. Somewhere deep in the stone, the rat network is farming, or plotting, possibly both. Historians still debate the presence of plant life in underground prisons. Some believe prisoners cultivated mold gardens as a hobby. Others think sunlight was too rare for anything organic to thrive. You now know, if rats want agriculture, rats get agriculture. Back in your room, you review the ledgers. 2 new prisoners are due to arrive next week. One is a suspected necromantic hairdresser. The other a fence painter of ill repute. You underline both names. You've had enough magical incidents for a while. You revisit cell 2. You open the door. You blink. It's dry. Still dry. But now there's a cup of tea. Steam rises from it. No one is inside. No heat source. No footprints. Just a mug, waiting. You close the door very gently. You place a polite "Do not disturb" sign on it. You walk away. In cell 6, Elias is performing a dramatic reading from the Torture-Free Incarceration Manual, assigning each prisoner a part. You catch him casting himself as the enlightened overseer. You roll your eyes. You assign him instead to Bucket 2. He accepts the role with dignity. Later, someone knocks from inside the wall. You pause. Wait. A faint voice says, "Wrong turn." Then silence. You take a moment, then walk on. The water has mostly receded now, replaced by a thick, slippery film that could either be algae or politics. You spot a prisoner polishing a spoon. Not for escape, for display. He's made a shelf of spoons. He has 12, all engraved, each with a name. You ask him why. He says, "They're my audience." You nod solemnly. May they applaud silently. Back at your desk, you find a tiny letter wedged under the moldy bread pile. You unfold it. It reads, "Thank you for not letting us drown, C9." You stare at it. Cell 9, the raft guy. You tack the note to the wall, next to your motivational scroll, and the cheese rind art installation. Outside it rains again, but just softly. A background hum. You light a candle. The flame dances like it knows a secret. You glance around. One bucket, one rat, a moldy desk, a group of oddballs humming torch songs. And somehow, it feels like home. You sit back. Let your legs float a little. There's work tomorrow. More grime. More weird deliveries. Probably another mysterious puddle. But for now, you close your eyes. The torch crackles. The water laps. And someone hums Elegy for a Moist Warden in the background. You let it happen. You're too tired to resist poetry. You're awoken at what might generously be described as morning by the sound of something crashing into cell 10. You leap up, more of a soggy stagger, really, and rush to the scene, mop in hand, ready for rats, raiders, or reality to collapse entirely. Instead, you find a delivery, a barrel, unmarked, still dripping from its descent through the hatch, which now hangs ajar. Inside the barrel, chamber pots, 30 of them, identical, gleaming, slightly smug. There's no note, no sender, no instructions. You stare at them. They stare back. The prisoners crowd behind you in reverent silence. One whispers, "Is it art?" You shake your head. "It's sanitation." They nod as if this is even more impressive. You allocate the pots, one per cell, except cell 2. That cell still refuses to be acknowledged by physics. You pass by later to find several of the pots being used as drums, planters, a hat, a communal soup bowl. You confiscate this one immediately. You make a mental note. Chamber pots are too versatile. Hide spares. In the supply closet, you now have 3 torches left. You light one. It's slightly damp. It hisses like a judgmental librarian. You reread the mayor's letter for motivation. It simply says, "Hang in there." You scribble underneath, unclear if this is encouragement or instruction. Gregor visits again. He brings a crate of books labeled confiscated witch literature, a bag of gravel, a wheel of cheese carved into the shape of the Duke. You take the books. You give the cheese to the rats. They seem honored. You read the titles aloud. Hexes for the modestly vengeful. The Wiccan's Guide to Porridge. Love spells for the desperate and damp. You shelve them next to the torture-free manual. Congratulations. You now have a library. Elias immediately begins organizing the books by vibe. You confiscate love spells and place it under your stool for balance. In cell 8, the soap figurine has gained a hat. It's made from old parchment and hope. You're touched. You give it a name, Warden Squish. The prisoners approve. Cell 5 is painting again, this time using ash from the torches. He's recreated a forest with trees and squirrels, and you, apparently in the background, hugging a bucket. You raise an eyebrow. He shrugs. It's metaphorical. You check the torches again. 2 now. You pass cell 3. They're building something, quietly, intentionally. A raft, yes, but with rooms. It has compartments, a spoon rack, seating, a lookout post. You ask why. They say, in case of future storms. You nod. That's the most rational thing you've heard in weeks. You help them install a rudder made from broken stool parts and mild delusion. Historians still debate the presence of flood response strategies in medieval prisons. Some cite floodgates and drainage ditches. Others think the idea of proactive planning in a dungeon is laughable. You now know the answer lies somewhere between engineering and daydreaming. Back in the hallway, a rat drags in a scroll. You unroll it. It's a poem about you. It reads, he sweeps the stone, he holds the line, with mop in hand and beard of brine. He feeds the rats, he stops the fights. He's Warden Squish, defender of knights. You blink. You tape it next to the soap figurine. You don't cry. Not really. Just some water from above. Probably. That night, Cell 7 teaches a meditation class. You attend. You sit. Breathe. Inhale the smell of damp moss and cheese. You feel the mold hug your lungs. You accept it. He chants, be the puddle. You try. You mostly become the overwhelmed sponge, but close enough. Later, you distribute soup. Turnip again. Someone added spices. Where from? Unclear. You don't ask. You slurp. You moan softly. It's the best thing you've tasted in a month. You tell them. They cheer, even the rats. One prisoner plays spoons in rhythm. Elias sings a chorus. You lean back against the wall. Let it all wash over you. Figuratively this time. You've mopped more than you've slept. You fought mold with a stern glance and possibly lost. You've become a reluctant father figure to a group of criminal poets and artisan frogs. And you've survived. Tomorrow? Who knows? Another flood, another bardic performance, another cheese sculpture. But for now, with warm soup and quiet music and a gently flickering torch, you are at peace. At least until the soap sculpture starts talking. But that's a problem for future you. You wake up not to the sound of water or screams, but laughter, which is significantly more unsettling. You rise from your moss-curated bedding and hobble toward the noise. Your left knee makes a sound like an old man stepping on a mouse, possibly because you are an old man and stepped on a mouse. You reach the main corridor to find Cell 9 handing out prison currency, strips of cloth, carefully dyed and stamped with his personal crest, a frog wearing spectacles. What is this, you ask? He grins. The Bank of Cell 9. You blink. It's backed by Spoon Silver, he adds. You blink again. He gestures to a crate full of bent spoons. We call it the Spoonard Standard. You sit down on your stool, which now has 4 legs again, don't ask, and try to mentally process the birth of a dungeon economy. Cell 5 is already selling portraits, tiny charcoal sketches in exchange for ribbits, the name of the currency. Cell 11 runs a betting ring over how long it'll take before the ceiling drips directly into your mouth. The over-under is 13 minutes. You confiscate nothing, you tax them instead. 1 ribbit per day. For sanitation services, you feel very official. Elias begins chanting, all hail the warden taxer. You raise your mop like a scepter. Immediately regret it. Your shoulder pops like someone snapping celery in a quiet room. You conduct a spot audit, which mostly consists of asking, do you have any frogs? And watching them pretend they don't. One prisoner is offering custom haikus for 2 ribbits apiece. You listen to one. Drip falls on my shoe. Rat squeaks the song of my soul. Lunch was turnip. Sigh. You pay him 3? It's disturbingly accurate. Historians still debate how prisoners pass the time in medieval dungeons. Some say prayer. Others say scratching the walls with fingernails. You now know economics and questionable literary output. Back in your corner, you discover someone's left you a gift. A small flag, painted on it, Gerald, triumphant, crowned. You mount it behind your desk. Gerald bubbles. You feel seen. You update your bucket list. Establish tax code. Replace moldy flag with glorious one. Done. You revisit cell 2. As you do, there's music, not bardic music. Something harp like. You open the door, nothing inside, except one single flower. Alive, blooming, rooted in a crack between stones. You nod. Respect. You water it with leftover soup. You close the door. Back outside, the dungeon economy is thriving. Someone's built a stall, made of planks, string, and trauma. They're selling spirit readings. You watch. The prisoner holds a beetle over a map. The beetle walks toward mild fortune. Everyone cheers. You confiscate the beetle. Its name Benjamin. You return it 2 minutes later. You felt judged. Later, a minor incident occurs in cell 4, a spoon duel. Apparently, there was an argument over ribbit inflation. You break it up with a single phrase. Last one to clean the latrine gets cell 2. They scatter. Peace restored. You sit by the main torch. It burns low. You feed it the last of Elias's unused rhymes. It grows brighter. Symbolism, probably. You inspect the mold wall. New messages have appeared. Some carved, some painted. One says, "Hope floats, like soup." Another, "Our warden is weird, but ours." You smile, because somehow, this madness is working. People are cleaner, more organized, possibly legally taxable. You light a candle and record the day's notes. Rat union still pending. Chamber pot exchange rate stabilizing. Gerald is now depicted in 4 murals. You may have invented feudalism by accident. You close your eyes. Behind you, someone strums a makeshift lute. The notes echo softly, weaving through the stone like steam. You hum along. You think about leaving sometimes. Then you remember, the outside world has taxes, weather, and people who don't name spoons. Here, you are monarch of mildew, sultan of soap sculpture, high priest of plumbing, dungeon keeper, and somehow economic consultant. And really, that's not the worst gig. You awake in pitch blackness. Not the usual cozy, damp darkness you've grown weirdly fond of, but the kind that feels thick, like you could chew it, which you might have to, since dinner last night was a mystery stew with notes of sandalwood and beet. You sit up, listen, silence. Not even a bard humming, not even a rat dragging a spoon across stone like a dramatic cello solo. You grab your mop, your trusted staff, your only friend with splinters, and step out. The torches are out, all of them. You light your emergency candle. Its flame is weak and judgmental. You move forward slowly. Cell 10, empty. Cell 11, still occupied, snoring like a collapsing bellows. Cell 9 has converted into a ribbit bank with posted hours and a bouncer. The bouncer is a chair with a scary drawing taped to it. You press on, then a creak. Not the usual dungeon creak of settling stones or Gerald's indigestion. No, this one is deliberate. You freeze. You sniff. Something smells minty. That's never good. You turn toward the corridor leading to cell 3, the raft architect. The door is open. The cell is empty. You step in. The raft is gone. You blink. The raft, a 6-foot, mold-resistant, somewhat nautical construction, is completely absent. Left behind, a scroll. You unroll it. Gone upstream, following the rats. May return with secrets, or wet boots. C3. You sit down, on the damp floor, next to a rat biscuit. Cell 3 has escaped. Not through a tunnel. Not through rebellion. Through the plumbing. You stagger back. Elias is awake now. He's holding a torch. "How bad is it?" he whispers. You hand him the note. He nods solemnly. "Ah, the pilgrimage begins." You frown. "Pilgrimage?" Elias explains. in the most dramatic whisper possible, that some prisoners believe in the above. Not just the surface world, but a better one with warmth, baths, bread without bugs, and people who don't name their rats after philosophers. You say, that's just a myth. He nods, like clean socks. Historians still argue whether prisoners dreamed of paradise or simply hallucinated one. The line, as you now understand, is very blurry after a diet of root stew and candle wax. You patrol the dungeon again, still silent, too silent. Even the spoon market has closed early. You check on Gerald. He's empty. That never happens. You open the hatch to the storeroom. Inside, a frog. On a throne, made of cheese rinds. Flanked by two beetles. You close the hatch. You take a deep breath. You continue on. Cell 2 is still sealed. You don't check today. You're not ready. You sit by the central torch. Relight it. Its glow feels smaller than usual. You reach into your tunic and pull out the sunflower seed from earlier. You plant it in the softest bit of moss near your desk. You whisper to it, don't get ideas. Elias hums a new tune. It's slower, sadder, still has spoons. He calls it Ballad for the Boat That Left. You allow it. The prisoners sit together. Quiet for once. Even the rats. You scribble in your log. Cell 3. Missing, presumed ambitious. Gerald, mourning. Frog King situation escalating. Possible quiet before inevitable dungeon-wide enlightenment event. You yawn. You rub your eyes. And then a tap on your shoulder. You turn. A rat. Wearing a cloak. Tiny. Red. Around its neck, a pendant made from a bead and wire. It looks up at you. Drops a scroll. Runs. You unroll it. We have accepted the pilgrim. He seeks the above. The way is dangerous, but he is brave. The underpaw. You sit. For a long while. Torchlight flickering. Drips echoing. Soup cooling. You whisper to yourself, I run a prison for philosophers, poets, and rats with capes. Then quieter, and I like it. Tomorrow, you'll have to explain the disappearance. You'll have to clean something probably. Someone will set fire to soap again. But tonight, you let your eyes close. You dream of rafts and rats and sunflowers that bloom in the dark. You wake to the sound of something scraping across stone. Not the usual gentle scuttling of a rat. Not the soggy slap of someone dropping a chamber pot. This is different. You open your eyes slowly, still half lost in your dream about a sunflower blooming through the floor of a tavern while a frog delivered your mail. You blink. The dream may not have ended, because standing at your door is a frog wearing mail, a tiny helmet fashioned from a walnut shell polished to a fine shine, a scrap of parchment tied to its back. You stare. The frog croaks, once, with purpose. You untie the message. From the pilgrim. Made it to the drain of divining. Met a bardless outpost. Morale remains high. Cheese supplies low. Signed, Cell 3. You sit down on your stool. So, he really did it. Navigated the sluices. Joined the underpaw. Started a movement. You feel proud. You also feel extremely concerned about liability. You feed the frog a beetle, nod respectfully, and send it back. Elias is already composing a saga. The Lay of the Wet Explorer. You confiscate the early draft. Too many puns involving or and more. You inspect the mural wall. New art has appeared. It shows a raft, Cell 3's gliding through a tunnel. Rats waving, frogs bowing. A banner overhead reads, Towards the light, but like, metaphorically. You add a note to your list. Frame mural before it gets soggy. You pass Cell 8, who is now teaching philosophy, to rats. They're attentive. One nods slowly at a statement about suffering being an internal construct. You don't intervene. Historians still puzzle over reports of animals being taught by prisoners, sometimes in mythology, sometimes in genuine desperation. You now consider the line between folklore and Tuesday to be paper thin. You head to the storage closet. The cheese wheel is gone, replaced with a stack of scrolls. Labels: How to Avoid an Uprising, Leadership for the Overwhelmed, Dungeon Feng Shui. You take the last one. Why not? According to it, your mop should face west for balance. You rotate it, immediately trip over it. Balance. Achieved. Later, you discover Cell 12 hosting a community forum. The prisoners discuss issues like torch shortages, spoon redistribution, and the ethical dilemma of rodent taxation. You take notes. You promise to form a committee, which everyone agrees means do nothing politely. You revisit Cell 2, because of course you do. Today, the door is open. You blink. Inside, soft light. No visible source. The flower has grown. It now has a second stem, 2 blooms, no footprints, just warmth. You step back, close the door, and write, Cell 2, now radiant, still suspicious. Back at your desk, Gerald gurgles. You peer inside, a single spoon, perfectly polished, wrapped in twine. You unwrap it. Etched into the handle, thank you. No signature, no clue. You place it beside Warden Squish, the soap sculpture. Your desk of meaning is now officially full. You start a second one. The Shelf of Weird. You receive another scroll from the Underpaw. This one includes a map of explored tunnels, a drawing of Cell 3's raft, now named the Drip Fender, a tiny pressed mushroom, labeled edible-ish. You update your log. Cell 3, still afloat. Dungeon morale, improbably high. Spoons, sentimental. Frogmail, effective. You sit by the central torch. It's holding strong. The prisoners gather. Elias hums. Someone plays a melody on chamber pots. It's haunting. You allow a smile. You remember when this place was wet, cold, and miserable. Now it's wet, cold, miserable, and oddly functional. You look around. Rats reading poetry. Frogs delivering mail. Soap carvings, resembling people you know. You? You're still the mop-wielding warden of this ridiculous place. Still tired. Still damp. Still the only adult in the room. And somehow, that's exactly where you belong. You begin the day with a ceremonial lighting of the torch. It's not actually a ceremony, but Elias insists on calling it one now. He hums a 5-note tune and sprinkles a dash of stale porridge over the base for luck. The torch crackles politely, accepts the offering. You both bow. Gregor drops by unannounced with his usual blend of irritation and fungus. He dumps a sack on your desk. Royal donation, he says, already turning to leave. Something about cultural enrichment. You open the sack. Inside, marionettes, 15 of them, all wearing little velvet cloaks and vaguely horrified expressions. One looks exactly like the Duke. Another appears to be you, except with better posture. You stare. Cultural enrichment, you whisper. Elias is already assigning roles. Within the hour, the first rehearsal begins. The play is called Rats, a Tragedy in 3 Sloshes. It includes a rat king who just wants a sandwich, a mop that's secretly the narrator, a dungeon keeper who doesn't know he's a puppet, awkward. You try to be offended, but the writing is solid. Cell, 5 handles set design, using old bread, ash, and a chamber pot that doubles as a moon. Cell 11 scores the music on spoons and sighs. The performance is scheduled for tonight. You prepare the corridor, arrange stones for seating, polish Gerald, hang a sign, tonight only, Soggy Theater. While sweeping, you discover Cell 9 has issued new currency, smaller ribbits called drips. Apparently the economy inflated after a particularly popular beetle-based betting pool. You reluctantly allow the new denomination, but issue a proclamation. No fractional frogs. Historians still dispute whether prison theater was truly a rehabilitative tool or simply something to keep prisoners from eating the walls. Evidence suggests that once you've got actors, rats, and a soundtrack, you've already lost control of your dungeon. Midday, a Rat Council representative visits. Yes, visits. They've grown more formal. The rat wears a tiny sash. The sash has pockets. You try not to be impressed. He squeaks once, bows, and presents a gift. A crumb cake made from breadcrumbs and uncertain enthusiasm. You accept with both hands. The rat nods, writes something in a ledger, and departs. You're now part of a mutual aid alliance. Unclear what the terms are, but they probably involve cheese. You check cell 2 again, because of course you do. Inside, a chair, perfectly crafted. Wood, real wood. Where it came from, you don't know. On the seat, a single daisy, still warm, still glowing. You mutter, "We're all in a fairy tale now," and close the door. You record in your log. Cell 2, furniture now involved. Rat, relations, diplomatic. Puppet likeness, rude but accurate. Spooned economy, spiraling. As the sun dips, or at least as the rats begin to yawn, the curtain rises. By curtain, we mean a moldy tunic on a stick. Elias narrates, in full bardic glory. The play begins. The Rat King sings a solo. The mop monologues. A puppet, you flails dramatically about how no one understands the burden of mildew. There's laughter, sobbing, spoon percussion. At one point, the puppet, Duke, yells, "Let them eat bugs," and someone from cell 8 throws an actual bug in response. You're pretty sure this is art. After the show, prisoners applaud. Rats squeak in chorus. Even Gerald gurgles appreciatively. You stand, nod, accept their praise. Someone hands you a bouquet of moss and turnip peelings. You curtsy. You end the evening with a toast, one communal sip of slightly clean water passed around in the fancy chamber pot. Everyone cheers. You return to your corner, sink into your stool. You stare at the stage. The torch still flickers. The puppets lie in a heap, as if sleeping. The dungeon is quiet, not silent, but peaceful. The kind of peace that comes only when everyone is too exhausted to be weird. You record the final note of the day. Dungeon morale, off the charts. You close your eyes. Somewhere, faint harp music plays. Somewhere a rat raises a tiny mug. And you rest. For tomorrow may bring floods, nobles, or another spontaneous rebellion. But tonight, you're just a mop-wielding theater manager in a dungeon made of dreams and mildew. Mostly mildew. Morning, if you can call it that, greets you with a scroll nailed to your forehead. Not metaphorically. Literally, a small scroll, tacked there by a delicate rat-sized pushpin. You sit up slowly, pull it off, squint through the residual parchment paper cut. Urgent. Warden position opening soon. By royal decree, current keeper to be reviewed. Possibly replaced. Date, soonish. Prepare thyself. Office of Supervisory Appointments. OSA. You blink. Read it again. Then do the only logical thing. You panic. Mildly. Quietly. Internally. Outwardly, you remain calm. You always do. Even when frogs throw plays at you. You look around at your office, which is technically a corner, partially collapsed, with 3 decorative spoons, a shrine to Gerald, and a sunflower seed sprouting between cracks. Professional? No. Functional? Technically. Glorious? Emotionally. Elias appears with tea. The mug says, "World's least fired warden." You don't know who made it. You suspect Cell 9's black market pottery ring. You take a sip. It tastes like moss and sympathy. You gather the prisoners. Hold a meeting. They sit on buckets and upside-down chamber pots. Someone's brought snacks. You explain the scroll. They gasp, then immediately begin planning a defense. Cell 11 suggests creating a diversion involving dancing goats. You reject it, mostly because you have no goats. Not since the hay incident. Cell 3, still absent, still somewhere in the undertunnels, sends a tiny note via frog courier. You've got this. We believe in your mildew. C3. You sniff. Pretend it's allergies. Cell. 7 offers meditation workshops for stress. Cell 8 begins composing a theme song. Cell 9 starts printing Keep Our Warden. Posters on strips of discarded parchment. Within hours, your face is plastered across half the dungeon. Not flattering drawings, but earnest. Even Gerald wears a pin. Historians still argue about the bureaucratic structure of medieval dungeons. Some assert that wardens were permanent until death, or mold overtook them. Others insist that political favors determine tenure. You now know, sometimes it just comes down to how good your soap sculptures are. Later, Gregor reappears. You heard about the review? He asks. You nod. He shrugs. Don't sweat it. Nobody else wants the job. He hands you a bag of slightly expired turnips and departs again, muttering about back taxes and frogs with attitudes. You start cleaning like your life depends on it, because it might. You rearrange the scrolls, polish the mop, give the rat throne a light dusting. You even try to fix the weird smell in cell 6 by hanging a sprig of something vaguely herbal. It hisses at you. You retreat. Meanwhile, cell 5 begins painting your portrait. Full robe, glowing torch, surrounded by smiling rats. You note that your real nose is not quite that heroic, but you allow it. That night, you hold a dungeon-wide feast, which means extra porridge with seasoning, songs including Warden of My Heart, which is alarmingly catchy, synchronized spoon clinking. You deliver a short speech. I have mopped through floods. I have fed prisoners and rats alike. I have been mildly electrocuted by my own torch system, and I have loved every soggy moment. Applause. Rats squeak in harmony. Elias weeps into his theater cape. You sit. A quiet settles. One last torch flickers overhead. The dungeon glows. Not literally, the torches are dying, but emotionally, radiant. You log the day. Threat of replacement, real. Support network, enthusiastic. Odds of being replaced by goat, moderate. Hope, stubbornly alive. You rest your head on your desk. A rat gently places a tiny blanket over your shoulders. Probably stolen. You don't care. You're warm. You're weirdly honored. You're home. Inspection day arrives with all the drama of a badly organized masquerade. You're woken by trumpet noises. Not actual trumpets, just Elias and Cell 10 humming into hollow bones with intense conviction. You dress in your finest. Tunic mostly free of mildew, mop combed, boots less squelchy than usual. Gerald has been polished. The rat throne has a new banner. We stand with Warden Squish. Someone's made a sash for you. It reads moist but mighty. You wear it, because dignity left this dungeon long ago, and now you're just embracing the mildew. Footsteps echo from the top stairs. Real ones, not prisoner stomps or rat parades. Leather soles, intentional pacing. The door creaks open. A woman steps in. Pale blue robes, crisp parchment scrolls under one arm, and a quill tucked behind her ear like a dagger. The royal evaluator. She looks around, sniffs once, winces. You resist the urge to hand her a mop. I'm here, she says, to evaluate the conditions and efficacy of the current warden. You nod, attempting something close to confident. Behind you, Cell 8 breaks into song. You wave him down. Not yet. You walk her through the dungeon. You show her the spoon economy, the soup upgrades, the sunflower sprout, the rotating mural wall, the frog mail depot, You even open cell 2. It's empty. No flower. No chair. Just light. Soft, golden. The evaluator stares, takes notes, whispers. I'll mark that as unexplainable but pleasing. She moves on. In cell 11, a rat reads her a poem. She actually claps. You reach the corridor theater. The puppets are neatly stored, the props labeled. One labeled simply, Warden's Heart, Foam Edition. She nods approvingly. Elias hands her a program. At your desk, she pauses, looks at the scrolls, the organization, you alphabetized the mold samples, the tribute mug, the Keep Our Warden posters, and finally, the soap sculpture of Gerald. It now wears a crown. She turns to you. Well, she says, you've redefined the expectations of a dungeon. Your heart skips. Is that good? She smiles faintly. Unclear, but certainly memorable. She signs a scroll, hands it over. Position retained, slight pay bump. Cheese stipend increased. You want to cheer. You want to cry. You mostly just sigh, deeply. She leaves as briskly as she arrived. The prisoners cheer. The rats squeak in four-part harmony. Elias tries to stage a reenactment, but gets stuck in the curtain. You sit at your desk. Gerald bubbles approvingly. Cell 5 presents you with a final painting. You, arms raised, mop aloft, torch in the background, rats dancing in formation. You hang it proudly. You water the sunflower sprout. You mop the hall. You thank the rat mail. You light a new torch. And for the first time in what feels like forever, you breathe. Not through mold, but through joy. Strange, musty, soggy joy. Because you've made something here. Not just a prison, a home, a community. A weird, slightly cursed, heavily cheese-dependent community. And tonight, as the candles dim and Elias sings you one more off-key lullaby, you sleep, knowing that somehow, impossibly, you are enough. You are Warden. You are loved. And yes, you still smell like soup. The torch dims gently in its sconce, casting long, flickering shadows across the worn stone floor. The hallway is quiet now, just the soft echoes of settling stone, the gentle scuttle of a sleepy rat curling beneath your chair, and the warm breath of the fire licking against cool iron. You lean back, hands resting in your lap, mop against your shoulder like a sleepy companion. The weight of the day melts slowly off your shoulders, down through your boots, into the floor. The torch gives one last flicker, then steadies. There's peace here, the kind that doesn't announce itself loudly, but seeps in like warm broth after a long storm. You glance once more toward cell 2, just a soft glow behind a cracked door, and let your eyes drift closed. Around you, the odd little world you've helped nurture sleeps too. Spoon traders curled under thin blankets, frogs standing silent guard at tiny checkpoints. Even Gerald's water, gently still, like he too is dreaming. Tomorrow will bring something else. It always does, but it doesn't have to come yet. Not now. For now, there's only the hum of a life bizarre and strangely beautiful, held together by string, soap, and a stubborn refusal to give up. And as you drift deeper into the quiet, you can almost hear it, a whispered chorus of thanks, of welcome, of home. You are not alone in the dark. You never were. Sleep well, Warden. You've earned it.